Oh man, this whole time I didn't even have my mic on. That's so funny to me. Well, hey, how are you all? Welcome to the AGF podcast, the podcast for the Home Education Foundation, the Florida's lobbying organization for parent-directed educational freedoms and the rights of parents all across the state to educate their children as they see fit without outside interference or onerous restrictions and influence of other institutions. We want the parents to be empowered to be able to make the decisions that they need to make to take their children and teach them the way that they feel they need to, especially in light of the direction many things in this world are going. We want to take a moment at the beginning of our podcast, as we always do. This is our tradition. We thank our top sponsors, especially our title sponsors. We have Arete coming in as our title sponsor and FPEA as a top sponsor. They have been with us for over this past year. It's been over a year now. Yay! And we have Fisher Precious Metals coming in as another one of our top sponsors. I feel like for so long we were promising that there were conversations happening and this list was getting bigger, and it's here, it's happening. And we're thankful for all of our sponsors. We're especially thankful for those sponsors who are parents. We see those donations come in. Oftentimes I'll be in the back and I'll message Brenda and I'll say, "Hey, do you know this person or that person?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I do actually." And I'm like, "That's awesome. I want to tell them thank you. That's so great. I just saw their donation come through." And it's excellent because when we see those coming in from families, we know you're with us. We know you're there kind of cheering us on and holding us up as we kind of trudge forward into all of these calls that we keep having. And all of these advocacy moments that we have. Man, there's just so much going on, Brenda. Where do we even start? No, really. Where do you want to start today?
Our constant work is we are trying to work with the school district, home education contacts with the DoE, and trying to resolve issues relating to the PEP program because the districts are complaining and they've got an overload of work. And of course, that's been an ongoing issue. But if you really think about what the districts do and their responsibilities, when the home education contact office was created, they just had to register a child in home education. And then over the last 40 years, we've gotten opportunities for kids to participate in Bright Futures and extracurricular activities and Florida Virtual School and all of these other ways that home education parents have to educate their children. And the districts have to confirm dual enrollment to the state colleges. They have to confirm that the children are registered. Now we've thrown PEP in there so that parents who choose to teach their children at home and apply for a scholarship, now they got to figure out where they're enrolled for attendance and their responsibility for withdrawing them. And we had some problems with that. We want these programs to run smoothly for our parents. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of logistical work that goes into educating everybody that's involved in it. School districts, Step Up for Students, AAA, all of those, and DOE. Sometimes people are not really aware of all the other laws in education and the overlap for these various programs. And last week, after our call, one parent was having a problem with dual enrollment. Well, actually, it wasn't a parent. Was it a parent that brought it, or was it the actual independent education? Anyway, the question was,
it was the college
independent post-secondary institutions have to have an articulation agreement with a school district in order to draw down the dual enrollment scholarship? So there's like 3 or 4 different sections of law that relate to that. Jason and I spent probably an hour and a half
Oh, it was more than that. Oh, man.
arguing about not really arguing, but what do you think about this? Well, this says
And challenging ideas and how to read
yeah.
it. And yeah.
And we
And
finally
there's
came
6
to a
different sections
conclusion.
of law.
Yeah, and how they interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, was that important for home education? It was important because the dual enrollment scholarship applies to all parents who are educating their children, whether they're in PEP or home education,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that, and private schools even,
Mm-hmm.
because those students through the college get free dual enrollment, and the colleges get paid for it if they report those students for funding.
Right.
But how do they do that? And so somehow,
And I think there was a nuance to that issue where in PEP it does mention that it can be used for tuition and fees as related to post-secondary instruction. So what was happening was the college was thinking that was the route, that these students, they would charge the students and then the students would pay and then they would get reimbursed. So that was the route. And I think that there was maybe a little misunderstanding and miscommunication, perhaps even on the part of the parents or the college itself, and needed clarification. I don't know that they even understood that the dual enrollment scholarship was a separate scholarship program. So there was a little bit of having to get into the weeds on that.
Well, because the districts, the way they've normally done things is they do an articulation agreement with the school districts so that the school districts accept the credits for high school for those students doing dual enrollment. But for home education students and PEP students, there isn't a requirement that they have a articulation agreement with the school district because they're not issuing diplomas.
Oh, there's so many moving parts. I feel like
it is very complicated.
I feel like you and I are so like used to this conversation now, but other people are sitting there going, "What are all of these words?"
I'm sure that they are, but even if they don't understand, it just gives you an idea why we are important. You know, I mean,
so you don't have to learn these words
because if you want your child to go to, which one was it? Southeastern Bible College?
South Florida Bible College. Yeah.
South Florida Bible College, and you're a home education family or a PEP family, they can't draw down money through the dual enrollment scholarship if they don't know the process. So they don't know who to call, and we end up getting the calls because other entities like the school districts giving them incorrect information. But that's all that the school districts know is their process. So when it doesn't fit and somebody's telling them, well, you can get reimbursed, they go, well, who do we call?
Right.
So that falls in our lap. And we were able to sort it out, and our interpretation of it was correct. And then we put them in touch with the right people at the DOE to figure out the process. So now all of the independent post-secondary institutions that are approved by the Commission on Independent Education can draw down a scholarship for dual enrollment, and we know the pathway for them to go.
And that's relatively new, if I'm not mistaken, because it was the Florida College Systems institutions that were able to do it before. And if I'm not mistaken, the independent
post-secondary institutions.
Thank you. I was going to say, when I listened to you say it, I'm like, that's so easy. Why is she messing it up? And then I go to say it and my brain loses the words. It's a mouthful. It means private colleges, for lack of a better way to say it. But yeah. they weren't necessarily included in that scholarship previously. That was something recent that was added. So it, as with all things new, like PEP and everything else, it's a really real challenge to kind of hitting the ground running with any kind of speed and not like running into some of these obstacles. So, thank you for your time, because I think that I was told maybe over 70 students were in jeopardy of just being unenrolled and losing their enrollment in the college because they were having trouble figuring that out. And I think
the college is going to have to eat those dollars, because they enroll the students. They're in classes, and they can't get funding for them because they thought they were okay to get the reimbursement.
Well, I think they're going to get it all figured out.
Actually, I think they thought that the PEP students were supposed to pay them.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I think the misunderstanding was. But I think all of that being cleared up now, I think it's interesting, because I was talking to the West Palm Beach Home Education Expo, and the people that I was talking to there, I was like, it's really funny to me it's interesting to me looking at all of the things that you have done, Brenda, over the years that have just kind of led to nothing bad happening when that's where they were headed. And when crises are averted, we don't always know how to stop and take that in and measure it, because it's like nothing happened. Like everything stayed good. That was great.
Well, one prime example was last year. People would say, "Oh, nothing happened in the legislature." Oh, it was a huge deal. Huge deal that we were able to stop.
Anyone who was following this live stream knows how hard we fought that battle.
Oh my word.
But that's a prime example of what you're talking about.
Yes, it is. You're spot on. I didn't even think about that. I'm like, oh, Brenda's been doing it all this time, but here we were right there with you doing it again.
Well, and I want to say that I appreciate the parents, because I see them in the Facebook groups all the time. The parents who were following what was happening last year, and the newer parents who are coming in, or if they're not new but they just weren't following it, they didn't know what was happening. The other parents are calling them on it. So if they post something in the Facebook group that looks like it could be used, interpreted in the wrong way, or misinterpreted or misused, parents will comment now and say, "Hey, this is what happened last year. This is what caused all of this. Please don't post things like that." And usually it's done in a respectful way, where they're like, "Maybe you didn't realize how this could come across. However, here's what happened last year. Please be more careful." That's so good. So I appreciate those parents so much who were following last year what happened, and they are helping to spread that information in that context to the newer parents who aren't aware of what almost happened last year.
That is so encouraging to me, to see that parents are aware and are educating other parents who are not aware, because it affects our funding. And let me just say,
in our fight,
this is a full-time job on a quarter-time pay or less. And we do so much work that my goal is for us to be able to raise enough money to hire Jason and Crystal full-time, so that Jason doesn't have to do side jobs to be able to support his family. Because people can't realize how much time is invested. Crystal is handling all of the Facebook social media responses to emails, which are many. And Jason is setting up meetings with Step Up for Students, with people that are helping us with other organizations, with the regular calls on Monday with a work group that we're involved in relating to legislative issues, as far as upcoming
committee meetings with
and now we've got one scheduled with school districts to see how they think we need to change the truancy law, does it need to be changed? Are we good? And all the nuances back and forth,
So
like, well,
much.
how's this going to affect home education? And Jason likes to philosophize on a lot of things, and so we're
That's
looking at all
code for I talk too much.
No, actually, your brain is running so fast that
Yeah.
you've got all of these ideas you're thinking about, which is good, but it's how to pare that down, how to make that mesh with the other laws that are out there. And when I was working by myself, I had a few attorneys that were home educating, that when I was drafting a piece of legislation, or if I was trying to amend something that was already in law, it would take me, knowing it was coming up, it would take me 3 months or so to run it by the people, to make sure I wasn't creating a problem for parents in doing what I was trying to do. Did I limit their rights? Did it conflict with something else? And I was a nervous wreck. As I've said before, I wasn't an attorney, and I had to learn how to read laws as we went forward. I didn't want to make any mistakes. And with good counsel, in those early years, we've created some really good statutes in Florida, which for the most part
Yes.
have not been amended except to make them better.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it's complicated. Craig once wanted to hire, our original thought in HEF was we would raise the money. We went around the state to the known homeschool groups at that time. We were trying to raise money to hire a lobbyist. He didn't have time because he had a full-time job, just like Jason's got a full-time job before he came on board here. And Craig was an attorney, and so he didn't have the availability to be in the legislature when he was supposed to be in court. So we wanted to hire a lobbyist, and it ended up that the lobbyist that we talked to that was the most educated, we thought would be the best lobbyist for us. He said, education law is so complicated. I won't do the committee meetings. I won't write any legislation for you. I will let you know if some issue is coming up that will affect you, because it is a very complicated issue.
It is.
You have one of those books handy? You can show the education statute book.
I have it here somewhere, but I have since kind of put it out of sight because it's I use the online version because I can keyword search it easier, but it's easily
a hefty book. Yeah.
It's easily that big, nose to chin.
Just education laws.
Yeah.
Just education.
Just education.
So he wouldn't take it on to be the lobbyist because of the nuances and the complications involved. So I just say that because, people don't have any idea how if one section of law is amended because somebody else wants to, it affects ours, and it's just it's a very complicated lobbying position, but it needs to be funded. So that's my bottom line, because we really have to have a lobbyist. I've said this over and over. I want to retire. And I'm so grateful for Jason and Crystal to be here to fulfill this responsibility. But still, there's a lot to know. Jason's just beginning to learn about ESE. Jason's just beginning to learn about FHSAA, and getting him assigned to that committee, the public liaison committee, so that every committee he can show his face and they won't do anything negative to homeschoolers because they have to answer to him.
Somebody's watching and they know it. Yeah.
And the Music Association. I mean, from time to time, we get complaints about what the Florida School Music Association is doing. And a couple of years ago, had to re-educate them about their own bylaws. I had to rewrite and show them their bylaws allowed the leaders of these organizations, the orchestras, the bands, the choral groups, whatever, that if they were home education groups, that the leaders of those, the directors, had the same privileges as those that were in a public school. But I had to point out all of their bylaws and rewrite those for them to make sure we got our rights in there. So it's a broad view. I mean, I'm happy that kids have all of these privileges because they can become the best of who they are.
Yeah.
You know, if you deny them music lessons, but that's their gift, then we haven't accomplished our purpose in allowing parents to be able to participate in all these various things. I mean, you know, take Tim Tebow. What if he didn't have the right to participate, but his parents said, we're going to homeschool? We'd never known who Tim Tebow was. He would have never had the opportunity to play sports unless he enrolled in a private school full time. So all of these rights and privileges are important to protect. And every year the legislature is here, we're in danger.
You know, it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking you were talking about how, you know, how quickly I've caught up on things and diving into things, and all of the things I was thinking about. Everything that you mentioned was not among them. I was like, there was so much. I was like, yeah, you're right. And then you list more that I totally was like, oh yeah, you're right. There's even more than what I was thinking. Oh man. Let's go to some of the comments, because Delene Howell's here. She says, keep opening last week's recording. It's been a long day, even though it's only noon. Well, Delene, we're glad you're with us. Clive is here. Thank you for what you guys do for homeschool families. Denise has a question in regards to what we were talking about. So, well, why don't we answer her question? She says, does a PEP student pay for dual enrollment classes at a private college? SEU, I'm not sure what SEU is. I can Google it. Give me a second. Or can it be direct pay? This is a good question. That was kind of what we were talking about. And there's like 5 different sections of statute that deal with how that gets handled. So for starters, the PEP scholarship and the dual enrollment scholarship are 2 totally different scholarships. They're not the same scholarship. And the dual enrollment scholarship that allows home education and PEP students to take dual enrollment classes at the colleges, universities, and now the private post-secondary institutions we lovingly call private colleges. As long as they're eligible, and there's another set of statutes that talk about their eligibility, then yes, that dual enrollment scholarship is what's used. And those private post-secondary institutions are by law not allowed to charge the student. So you can't pay for it with PEP if they're not allowed to charge you for it. So that's kind of where that disconnect happens in statute. But then there are, I believe it is books, Brenda, instructional materials was what was excluded in statute from the dual enrollment scholarship for private post-secondary institutions. And so your PEP funds can be used to cover the instructional materials.
Yeah, Clive had actually commented and gave a great summary of what you just explained. He said dual enrollment is a separate program by the State Department of Education. You can use PEP funds for college, but PEP funds should supplement dual enrollment, not replace. So that second sentence is sort of what Jason was trying to explain. There are certain things not covered by dual enrollment, and you would be able to use PEP funds for those.
There are certain things not covered by dual enrollment.
Let me throw out a home education student who is not receiving a PEP scholarship, they have their books covered.
Correct.
And if you are
by the college.
If you are PEP, then you could use PEP funds for any of the instructional materials that are approved in the purchasing guide.
Yes, all of that is correct. It's Southeastern University in Lakeland, apparently. Okay, cool. Very good. Well, I mean, if they need help navigating any of that, we are here. You can point them to us. Our contact information's on our website. And if you're running into issues and you need advocacy, they're just not understanding it. I also found out that the articulation agreement, through my conversations with the Department of Education, the articulation agreement that the private post-secondary institutions are supposed to use to be uploaded, that portal is buried like 9 pages deep in the Department of Education's website. And to them, they know exactly where it is. The DoE knows exactly where it is, and it makes sense and everything like that. But when a college or a private college is new to this, or trying to figure it out, it is almost impossible to find. I literally had to have him walk me through it, click by click, page by page, and then I sent that link over to the college so that they would have it, because I was like, this is buried.
Okay, you brought up something we didn't discuss before.
Okay.
So let me expand on that. There are two different articulation agreements. One is that the colleges, if they are home education students, they used to have an articulation agreement with the school districts. They still do that. And the articulation agreement is with the public school system. But because they don't want to do two different articulation agreements at the school districts, they just incorporate home education students in that articulation agreement, so they're held to that. Okay. Now, for the dual enrollment scholarship, there's a requirement that the colleges have an articulation agreement with the home education student. So because they're private and they don't have any relationship with the school district, they would have a direct articulation agreement that they have to file with the Department of Education that they do with home education and now PEP students. So you're talking about the one that's the private one, not the articulation agreement that applies to public school students and home education students, which shouldn't be, but that is what it is. So all of those agreements by law are supposed to be posted on the DOE website. But whether you can find them or not is another issue.
Mm-hmm. And the colleges can't draw down funds for the students that are enrolled in the scholarship if they don't have one posted. So it's important, the Department of Education looks at it and goes, well, we don't even have an articulation agreement with you on file. So how can you have these students participating in it? Yeah. There's a lot. It was very educational week last week. We dove into many issues, including the one, with the truancy that we didn't even know about. Where the student had lost his driver's license status. That was wild. So we have another dual enrollment question from Lupita. Hello, Lupita. She says, I have a question about dual enrollment that has come up a lot in my groups in the past few months. If I remember correctly, homeschool students now can enter into an articulation agreement with any state college. They are not required to be limited to the state college that serves their county. Is that factual? And if so, could you possibly link the documentation that supports that? I've been searching the statutes and the Florida Department of Education for that, but I can't find it. I remember Brenda mentioning something like this at the convention a few years back.
There has to be an agreement between the two state colleges because there still is territories.
Mm-hmm.
And if you live in a certain county, then you're required to attend that one unless another one offers a different program that is not offered at that college. They can make internal agreements for that. There's no law that I'm aware of that says that home education students can go anywhere they want to. If you're enrolled in a private school, umbrella school, that private school can make an articulation agreement with state colleges across the state if the colleges are willing to make an articulation agreement. I've worked on districts before trying to educate them that umbrella schools are basically distant learning programs and that there's no requirement that the school be located in their district. And we've gotten agreements with some of those colleges and umbrella schools so that if a student lives in Lake County, but the school is in Manatee County, that the student that lives there can go to that college. But to answer Lupita's question is, I don't know of any law that determines that. That's just an agreement between the colleges.
So Denise has a follow-up. She says, so I am clear, would I contact the college and ask if they have an articulation agreement or pay for the classes and put in a request for reimbursement? So they're not allowed by law to charge a student who is dual enrolled for the classes and tuition, for courses and tuition.
Is that just home ed? I can't remember what we decided.
She's PEP.
Yeah, because they do the same. Yeah, you're right.
And so they would need to have an articulation agreement, and then they would need to draw down funds from the state.
They need to have
through the dual enrollment
an
scholarship.
Articulation agreement for home education students.
Correct.
Not an articulation agreement with the school district.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's correct.
Yeah, so those are all things that you would want to make sure, Denise, that you talk to the college, call them, explain that your student is PEP and what you're wanting to do. You definitely wouldn't want to just register them and pay for classes and then try to get reimbursed later. Because your student is going to need to be categorized the correct way for dual enrollment. Yes.
And by law, they're not allowed to charge you for those. So if they're dual enrolled. So the PEP scholarship doesn't cover, it can be used for expenses related to tuition and fees at a post-secondary institution, but it's not needed to cover what the dual enrollment scholarship statutes and the dual enrollment scholarship covers. And in those statutes, the independent post-secondary institutions that we lovingly call private colleges are not allowed to charge the students for tuition and fees.
Why don't you post that statute number? I think it's 1009.
There was several.
The scholarship, 15. I can't remember the point part for the dual enrollment scholarship. But if they're trying to get a post-secondary institution that their child wants to go to on board with the dual enrollment, they need to look at the scholarship. And if I remember correctly, Jason, I wasn't looking at the statutes as we discussed it. I don't compute too well online. I have a book and I know where things are located in that book, but I was traveling. So when we were having this discussion, it was hard for me to remember. But I think you pointed out that PEP is actually listed as part of the dual enrollment scholarship.
It is.
They didn't list them in all the statutes, but they did list it in the scholarship statute. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I'm actually, it's in a doc so I'm emailing it to myself so I can pull it up. But the rules, the rules that govern it have all the statutes linked. I think all the statutes are linked there.
You're talking about the administrative rule?
Mm-hmm. They had them linked. Let's see. Ooh, my computer's glitching. Okay, let's do it this way then, since you want to be difficult.
So while he's working on that, Crystal, are there more comments or questions?
Yes, Denise had a follow-up question. She said, "Thank you. One more question. Do I have to claim somewhere that we are dual enrollment with the DOE to make it official?"
No.
So then if she, just to make sure that she's clear on the steps, if she's wanting her child to dual enroll, she just reaches out directly to the college? Yeah.
They may not all be familiar with PEP if your student's on PEP. Or if they're on UA, then you're automatically covered under home education laws.
Yeah, so you may, Denise, you may need to be prepared to do some explaining if you get someone at the college who doesn't know what PEP is. We're finding, because it's still so new, not all the employees at colleges or even the school districts are really informed as to what it is or how it all works. So you may have to explain, if your child is on PEP, what that is, and you can reference the statutes that the statutes for PEP and the definition for PEP refer to the home education statutes, which include dual enrollment. So you may have to reference those if you run into an issue. But yeah, just contact the college of your choice directly and explain to them what it is you're wanting to do. They should have a department or somebody that's kind of in charge of handling the articulation agreements.
Dual enrollment, yeah. Mm-hmm. And bottom line, if you can't work it out, then call Jason.
Yes, yeah, if the college is not willing to work with you, then yeah, reach out to us, because certainly that's something that we've helped advocate for.
This is, wait, where did it go? I seem to have misplaced it. I had them all pulled up, and now I've got like a million tabs open.
Crystal can post it later in the forum.
I know that one of them was 1011.64. And that was under the funding and the rules for funding. That's not where PEP students are listed.
No, they just need the dual enrollment scholarship, which is in 1009. If I had my book here, I could dual enrollment scholarship.
So Clive pointed out, be very careful. PEP will confuse the colleges. Inquire about dual enrollment first, and they'll walk you through their dual enrollment process. PEP conversations will confuse the college. So that's probably good advice. Just start with dual enrollment, but at some point in that conversation, you're going to need to explain to them that you are PEP, because the way that works is going to be slightly different from the way that home education works.
Because they shouldn't be treated differently, because they're all on the dual enrollment scholarship.
But whether books are covered and things like that are going to be different.
Yeah. But
it's 30.
30?
Yeah, 1009.30.
Okay, that's a dual enrollment scholarship. That's what you need to show to the college if there's a question. And then you need to make sure they understand that you don't have to pay up front, because some of them won't enroll you in the courses if you haven't paid. So you need to show them that if they're saying we can't enroll you because you haven't paid. That's probably at that point when you need to have that conversation. Other questions we can clarify?
Lupita said, I wonder if we can be proactive and send out 28 emails to all the DE coordinators asking them for their specific process for PEP students.
Us do that?
She said we. I think maybe she's meaning parents to reach out to kind of kickstart the colleges into thinking like, oh, I guess we need to have a process in place for this.
Yeah, and the section of law that specifically states under funding, this specifically states the independent post-secondary institutions are not allowed to charge the students. So students enrolled in dual enrollment instruction shall be exempt from the payment of tuition and fees, including laboratory fees. And that's in the payment part of the law. And then the part of the law that says that the dual enrollment scholarship is for PEP students, meaning that they're not using their personalized education program scholarship, but they're using the dual enrollment scholarship to do this. It names them and places them in 1009.30. And then the other law, or the other section, is 1011. Let me see. It's 1011. I had it. I don't want to scroll up. There it is. 1011.62 parens 1 parens I. That's specifically about the private post-secondary institutions and how they get their funding. So
I just want to add something to this conversation because I don't know who might watch this later, and I just remembered these conversations I've seen many times actually in the Facebook groups. When we are saying dual enrollment, we are referring to a high school student who is enrolling in college classes that will also satisfy high school credits.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very specific term. I have seen parents arguing that dual enrollment is when a homeschool kid is also taking classes at a public school district. So dual enrollment is a very specific phrase in statute, and it means a very specific thing. It's different than if your child is just taking extracurriculars at the public school district. Dual enrollment is not the term for that.
That's part-time enrollment.
So I have seen parents arguing, like vehemently arguing back and forth that I guess the school district told them it was called dual enrollment. And so that's been a point of confusion for some discussions where we're not all using the same terms in the same way. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that dual enrollment in statute means something very specific. So.
I laugh because that seems to be the motto of the last year. Because it's like, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And it's like we use the word homeschooling to refer to private school students, PEP students, and home education students. It's like they're all mixed. I even saw a TikTok the other day. Was it a TikTok where the girl?
Oh, the one I showed you?
Oh my goodness! I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah, so it was just something that popped up on Instagram for me because my feed, of course, now is calibrated to all kinds of education related things. Yeah. And she was doing her kindergartner's homework for him after he had gone to bed because she didn't want him to be counted off. And her whole argument for it was, I'm protecting him from the way that the charter school is demanding that he do this. Like, his time at home should be his time at home. He goes to the charter school and that's his time at school. But then she said, in the context of all that, she's like, this is why we homeschool. I'm like, wait, now I'm confused. Like, how do you have a charter school assigning homework for which he's going to be graded to the point that you feel the need to do the homework for him?
And then how are you calling that?
And yet you are calling it homeschooling, and all the hashtags were homeschooling hashtags.
Yeah, hashtag homeschooling. Am I right?
Most likely, I'm guessing it's some kind of hybrid program where they're, considered. Sure. And it wasn't in Florida. So I decided not to comment because statutes are different in different states and terms are different in different states.
Yes.
But it was a great example of how confusing things can get whenever you're not using the same terms.
That's a good place to pivot as we wrap up the podcast today, where there's not only challenges with uses of terms inside Florida, but as trends across the nation impact home education and school choice and expansion, there's a lot of trends, and there's co-opting of terms, or I would say hijacking of terms and terminology, and they're not all used to mean the same thing. And it's like we just want to call it this. We'll do whatever we want to do, but we just want to call it this so that we can get the funding, or we just want to call it this so that we can do what we want to do, and they'll call it one thing and then do something else. And there's a very real need to kind of keep an eye on the trends that are happening across the country, how legislators across the country are dealing with some of these trends, how parents are abusing the trends, how companies are abusing the trends to prey on parents who are gullible. And there's just a giant mess of things to keep an eye on, especially in regards to Florida, the way that Brenda has helped us have it, with so many years of vigilant watchfulness over the language and the importance of the language and the terms and the uses of them. So we're not going anywhere. We're here. Funding or not, we're not going anywhere. We're here. But it sure would be a whole lot easier to focus on the problems.
Yeah, well, the problem that we're going to be facing upcoming, and we're already trying to get some clarity on it, is the term microschools, which is used in other states. And they want to say we're home education programs because they can do that, well, home education instructional programs, because that's the only way they can get funding, if they prove that they are home education instructional programs. But it really is a school directed by somebody else directing the education, not the parent directing it. And it's a full-time program. Maybe they do their work at home as a distant learning program, but it's not a home education instructional program. So we tried to get that defined in law last year. And so either we get that defined in law this year, or we help the micro schools determine who they are, because they don't know who they are. I mean, we've talked to several people. It's just like, well, we just want to operate. We don't want any laws.
We don't want any definitions. Right.
We don't want any laws to regulate us. But what they really don't understand is laws protect you.
Right.
And if there isn't a way for micro schools to legally operate in the state of Florida, then where are the kids registered for attendance? Can the parents be charged with truancy? Because they're not illegal.
There's so many questions. Yeah.
I mean, just on and on the various questions that are out there. And my personal opinion, and the reason that we work so hard in the beginning to create the first school choice program, I want to reiterate that we were there in the beginning, but it was a group of parents that fought really hard to create something outside of the public or private schools. And we wanted protection in the law. There was another national group that fought us because they wanted to fight the battle in court. But that was very dangerous, because you never know what a court is going to rule. They could have ruled, based on Florida law, that it was illegal for parents to teach their children at home, because that's the way the current law was written.
And in some counties, if it was up to them, that's how it would be.
And when you go to court, they're referencing the laws as the basis for their decisions.
Exactly.
So working from the law being the focus there, that makes so much more sense.
That is your protection.
Yeah.
So the thinking of, we just want to do what we want to do, where we want to do it, and don't tell us anything, is wide open for prosecution. And, you know, they can shut down the school, then where are the parents, you know? So so that's a big issue. We're going to have groups fighting us this year because they don't want any regulation, and yet they want to get the PEP money to operate their schools. I mean, clearly they call themselves micro schools. They're schools. Yeah.
I think the balking on any definition at all is kind of a challenge, right? Like, because well, then what rights do you have if you're not, if you're not recognized, then none of your rights are. So then, you know, how do you defend them? How do you protect them? You need a definition of some kind, whether or not you want to settle on one, or how big for it to be, or less restrictive. That's a totally different, separate thing. But if you can't find it yourself defined, you can't find yourself protected, or you'll constantly be challenged.
They could be private schools, except they have to follow, and the laws that are in 1002.421, which say they have to have radon tests, regular fire inspections, health inspections, on and on. They have to meet building codes, which determines what the doorknobs look like on your doors, and on and on and on. For the building codes, they're just unbelievable.
That's a lot.
So they don't fall in the category of private schools because they don't want to operate in buildings due to local codes, fire codes, and all that. They can't get approved in a building. So they're trying to find a niche that they can hijack so they can get the money. I mean, you can tell I'm not too favorable. I don't care if the schools operate in Florida. Yeah. I don't want them to operate without some laws and regulations, because if you are taking your child to what you think is an approved school and it operates in a residence, and that's my big hang up, is they want them to be able to operate in a residence. Who is
not all of them?
Huh?
Not all of them.
No, but a lot of them. I mean, they're it's a divided group.
It's so hard to It's such a divided group because it's so hard to. Are we talking about these micro schools or these micro schools or the ones that are like there's such a lack of a definition. It makes it difficult to even know which version of it you're talking about. So that it just kind of it's going to be a long-term problem, and I think the biggest challenge they face is they're going to face challenges with a lack of definition. So then if you don't fit one, then your function and form determines what definition, for the sake of adjudicating a case, you end up being stuck with, because there isn't another one that you actually fit. So then you're going to be forced into some form of being able to talk about you or describe what it is that you do.
In order to protect parents, they're going to have to be put in an attendance lane. And so regardless of their desire to define themselves legally, they're going to have to pick a lane. Are they a private school? Are they a home education program? In which case they don't have the right to direct the child's education. The parents would be the ones doing that, and they would just be providing supplementary services like home education instructional programs do. So they're going to have to pick a lane. Are they private tutoring? And I think the reason that's important is because I worry about parents who just blindly trust what a seemingly official institution tells them. We've seen this many, many times.
Yeah,
and the parent doesn't know until they run into a problem. And then suddenly their kid has been truant, or they have these other issues, and they never knew because the school had told them that it was working a certain way. There was one instance we heard of where it was a VPK program who decided to start offering kindergarten classes. And the parents didn't understand the difference between the two. And so those kids were truant for the entire, they thought their kids were in kindergarten and were properly enrolled in a kindergarten, but it was just like a private institution that wasn't part of the school system.
And they never sent in a letter of intent.
And the parents just didn't understand the nuances of how that worked. So I think this is why it's important to think your kid is meeting all of the requirements of statute because some institution has told you that they are, and then finding out later that they aren't actually is kind of my concern.
And that, what you just mentioned is exactly what I was going to circle us back to, boomerang us back to, which is the use of terms. It's a constant challenge, and I get it, that we kind of loosely use homeschooling to refer to all of them. And then we loosely call this over here that. And as long as there's no problem, there's no problem. But the moment that there is, it's a big problem when there's no definitions and things like that. So just be mindful, when you're hearing the terms, and especially if you're seeing advertisements, make sure that when you check videos on social media as they roll by, there will be a little sponsored tag above or below the video, depending on which platform you're on, that you can look at to make sure that the video is a sponsored video, meaning somebody's paying to give you their, for lack of a better term, propaganda or their pitch. to get you in. They want to sell you something. No one advertises to you that's not selling you something. So let that also be in the top of your mind. So when you're seeing some of these concepts being sold to you and they're using words that are familiar to you and to us that we use, just keep in mind that they're not really always used the same way in other states and then across the country. So we live in Florida. Let's be vigilant and use the words here.
And
that's my encouragement in charge for the day.
Delene Howell had one question I just want to hit super fast before we wrap up.
Okay.
She said PEP purchasing guide questions. There's some confusion on whether music lessons still need an EBF, which is the educational benefit form.
Right.
The new handbook is confusing on where it places music on a list saying it's a qualifying reimbursable expense, but then puts another list of things that need an EBF and music isn't on it. Also, any word on when we may be able to start requesting the new category of subscriptions, streaming, and TV. So I just wanted to hit this one because some of it does relate to the statutes and how things break down. In terms of whether music requires an EBF, that's a step-up question, but my understanding is that all electives require educational benefit forms. And I did look at the page that you're referencing, and it says educational benefit forms are required for electives including, and then it kind of has a little list, and enrichment classes is on the list, but specific electives are not relisted. I think the intention there was that electives are just sort of lumped in there, but then they wanted to also specify some other things that would fall under that, but you could double check with them to be sure. As for the question on when you can start submitting reimbursements for the new things that were released, that's the 24-25 purchasing guide. So anything that falls within this school year, which started on July 1st, should be able to be submitted. So I just wanted to kind of hit that. I've seen parents asking that question too, like, can I submit reimbursements for things that I purchased for this school year before I was funded? The answer to that is yes. If you look in the parent handbook, it actually says all purchases, no matter when you were funded, if you're awarded for this school year, then your date basically begins July 1st for when you can submit reimbursements. You see the little hand over here.
Chunky. What's he doing in there? He's he's hijacked our video.
He just wandered in.
He's raising his hand to get some attention.
He's so
both
polite.
His parents are tied up.
What a good kid. All right. Well, Brenda, if there's nothing else, I'll let you, have last crack. Is there anything you want to say before we go and I do our spiel?
The only last thing I would say, and maybe we can have more of it nailed down by next time, but we're trying to figure out with the different organizations involved is when is a parent actually enrolled in a PEP program? So
let's throw that grenade out there right at the end.
Yeah. That's like the to be continued thing at the end of the episode. We'll address this next week.
Where is Steve Rogers to fall on that grenade for us? Oh my word. Yes, that is on our radar. It's actually, one of the reasons why we were a little bit late is because getting on this today was that a call we were on for that very reason. So lots to dive into for that. Maybe we'll jump into that next time, or you might see some updated posts on the forum or Facebook for that. So check that out. In the meantime, Brenda did speak a lot about the support. We try to make it as easy as possible for parents to support us and what we do. We have over 150,000 students in home education across the state of Florida. So those families, if we had a good army of people who are able to spread the word and help us get the word out there that we are in need of support, I think we could easily reach our funding goals just by that alone. And, as simple as $5 a month, $10, $25 or $50 or so. If you have a business, there's a $100 a month program that we have where there's a little bit of advertisement and you get listed on our recognition wall. And some neat little business-oriented benefits that add some value for our business owners that want to show that they support home education in Florida. But if none of these fit what you're capable of doing and your family is tight and strapped, do not give to us. Take care of your family first. That is the best thing that you can do to empower them is take care of them. So we're not necessarily trying to pinch anybody's pockets here. and stretch you guys beyond your means. We thank you for the support that we do get. We love seeing those come in. And speaking of support that we do get, we also want to take this moment to thank our top sponsors. We have Arete, who's our title sponsor this year. We have FPEA, who's one of our top sponsors, who's been with us for the past year. Fisher Precious Metals. We thank you all for all of the sponsorships and the support that you give to us. And without anything additional, I'll give you guys your Monday back. Go do wild things and learn a lot and enjoy those memories with your children. And we're here if you need us, and we'll see you guys next Monday.